There was a time when this man believed life had already forgotten him. Every morning felt heavy before it even began. He lived in a tiny, worn-out room with cracked walls, a weak fan that barely worked, and a silence that somehow felt louder than noise itself. The alarm clock beside his bed rang again and again every morning, but most days he ignored it. He would pull the blanket over his head, trying to escape a reality he no longer had the strength to face. Outside his window, the world kept moving. People rushed to work, shops opened, buses roared through the streets, and somewhere out there, dreams were being built. But inside that dark little room, time felt frozen. He was poor, but the hardest part was not the lack of money. It was the feeling that his life had no direction. Day after day, he repeated the same exhausting cycle. He slept late because nights became his escape from reality. Hours disappeared while scrolling endlessly through his phone, watching other people live lives he wished he had. Successful people. Happy people. Disciplined people. Meanwhile, he kept telling himself that tomorrow would be different. But tomorrow always looked exactly like yesterday. The mornings were the worst. He woke up tired, even after sleeping for hours. His body felt heavy, but his mind felt even heavier. Bills piled up on the table beside him. Missed opportunities haunted him quietly. Sometimes he stared at the ceiling for long periods without moving, wondering how life had become this way. He remembered being younger, full of ambition, believing he would someday become someone important. Back then, he thought success belonged to people who worked hard enough. But now, after years of failure, disappointment, and rejection, he began to think maybe success only belonged to other people. Everywhere he looked, he saw reminders of how far behind he was. Friends from school were building careers, buying homes, traveling, starting families. Social media became a daily torture. Everyone seemed to be moving forward while he remained trapped in the same place, repeating the same mistakes, wasting the same hours, living the same empty routine. And slowly, something dangerous began happening inside him. He stopped believing he could change. That is the real tragedy of failure. It does not destroy you all at once. It happens quietly. A little less confidence each day. A little more doubt every night. Until eventually, you wake up one morning and no longer recognize the person you have become. He stopped taking care of himself. He stopped exercising. He stopped reading. He stopped dreaming. The days blurred together until life became automatic. Wake up late. Rush through the day. Feel exhausted. Escape into distractions at night. Sleep too late. Repeat. Months turned into years faster than he realized. And the most painful part was this: deep inside, he knew he was wasting his life. He knew he was capable of more. But he no longer had the energy to fight against his own habits. Sometimes at night, he would sit alone in darkness and ask himself questions he could never answer. Why am I stuck? Why does life feel so difficult? Why do some people succeed while others slowly disappear? He blamed his circumstances. He blamed bad luck. He blamed the economy, his background, his lack of connections. And maybe some of those things were true. But there was one thing he refused to examine honestly: the way he was living every single day. One night, after another exhausting and meaningless evening, he fell asleep later than usual. The room was hot. The streets outside were still noisy. His mind was restless. He remembered feeling a strange emptiness before closing his eyes, as if life was slipping through his hands faster than he could hold onto it. Then something unusual happened. At exactly 5 a.m., he woke up suddenly. No loud alarm. No phone notification. Just silence. At first, he was confused. The room was still dark, but not completely dark. A faint blue light touched the walls. The city outside had not fully awakened yet. For the first time in years, he was awake before the noise began. He looked at the clock again. 5 a.m. Normally, he would have gone back to sleep immediately. But something felt different. The air itself seemed calmer. The usual stress that greeted him every morning was strangely absent. There were no messages, no distractions, no pressure yet. Just quiet. So instead of sleeping again, he sat there. And for the first time in a very long time, he could actually hear his own thoughts. He walked slowly to the window and looked outside. The streets that were normally crowded and chaotic were almost empty. The world felt peaceful in a way he had forgotten was possible. The sunrise had not fully arrived yet, but the darkness was slowly fading. And standing there in silence, watching the sky begin to change colors, he felt something unexpected. Hope. Not a loud, dramatic kind of hope. Not instant motivation. Just a small feeling deep inside him whispering that maybe his life was not over yet. Maybe he had been living the wrong way for too long. Maybe the problem was not only his poverty. Maybe the problem was that he had lost control of himself. And although he did not understand it yet, that quiet morning at 5 a.m. was about to become the beginning of a completely different life. The next morning, he woke up at 5 a.m. again. This time, it was not an accident. The night before, he had hesitated before setting the alarm. Part of him already knew it would be difficult. His body was still used to sleeping late, wasting hours in distraction, and escaping reality after midnight. But something about that quiet morning had stayed in his mind all day long. While working, while eating, while sitting alone in silence, he kept remembering the strange peace he had felt before sunrise. It was a feeling he had not experienced in years. A feeling that life was not attacking him yet. A feeling that the world had not fully entered his mind. So he set the alarm for 5 a.m. When it rang the next morning, every part of his body wanted to stay in bed. His room was cold. His eyes were heavy. His mind immediately began negotiating with him. Sleep a little longer. You can start tomorrow. 1 more hour will not matter. But for some reason, he forced himself to sit up. And that small decision changed something inside him. At first, he did not know what to do with those early hours. He simply sat quietly near the window with a cup of water in his hands, watching the sky slowly brighten. But the more mornings he experienced, the more he realized something important. 5 a.m. was different from every other hour of the day. During the day, life felt loud. Notifications, responsibilities, noise, stress, pressure, distractions. The world constantly pulled his attention in 1,000 directions. But at 5 a.m., none of that existed yet. The streets were still quiet. Phones were silent. Most people were asleep. It felt as though time itself had slowed down. And in that silence, he began noticing something he had ignored for years: his own mind. For the first time in a long time, he could think clearly. He realized that his life had not been destroyed in one dramatic moment. It had been destroyed slowly through habits, through wasted mornings, through endless distractions, through living every day without intention. Most people think success is built through huge opportunities or sudden breakthroughs. But sitting there alone in the early morning darkness, he began understanding a different truth. A person's future is often hidden inside their daily routine. Every morning became a mirror. When he woke up late, he felt weak, rushed, and behind. The entire day started with stress. But when he woke up early, something changed psychologically. Even before achieving anything, he already felt more disciplined, more awake, more in control. It was as if he had won a small battle against himself before the world even opened its eyes. That feeling became addictive. Soon, waking at 5 a.m. was no longer just about waking early. It became a private moment between him and life itself. A moment where he could breathe before chaos arrived. A moment where he could hear his own thoughts instead of everyone else's opinions. He started going outside just before sunrise. The air felt different at that hour, cooler, cleaner, calmer. Sometimes he walked through empty streets watching the city slowly awaken. Shop owners preparing for the day. Workers quietly setting up their carts. Birds calling into the morning sky. And as simple as those moments were, they awakened something powerful inside him. He realized that while most people were still sleeping, some people were already building their future. That thought stayed with him deeply. He began studying successful people online and noticed a pattern. Many of them protected their mornings fiercely. Not because waking up early was magical, but because mornings shape momentum. The first hours of the day influence the mind more than people realize. If the day begins with distraction, the mind becomes distracted. If the day begins with discipline, the mind becomes disciplined. And slowly, his identity started changing. Not all at once. Not dramatically. But quietly. He stopped seeing himself as a victim of life. He stopped thinking of himself as simply the poor man who failed. Every morning at 5 a.m. became proof that he was capable of changing something. Even if it was small. That is the hidden power of discipline. Motivation is emotional. It comes and goes. Some mornings he still felt tired. Some mornings he wanted to quit. Some mornings the bed felt impossible to leave. But discipline is different. Discipline acts even when emotions disappear. And each time he got up despite resistance, his confidence grew stronger. Not confidence from money. Not confidence from success. Confidence from self-control. For years, he had been losing battles against his own impulses. Sleeping too much. Escaping through entertainment. Avoiding difficult truths. But now, every morning at 5 a.m. became a quiet victory. No applause. No audience. Nobody knew. But deep inside, he knew. He was becoming mentally stronger. One morning, while watching the sunrise alone, a strange realization entered his mind. The sun rises every single day without fail. It does not wait for motivation. It does not complain. It simply appears, consistently, endlessly, faithfully. And maybe human transformation works the same way. Not through giant emotional moments, but through repeated consistency. That thought changed him deeply. He no longer waited to feel ready before improving his life. He understood now that feelings were unreliable. Action had to come first. And as days turned into weeks, the early mornings began changing the way he saw himself. The poor man who once believed life had forgotten him was slowly discovering that perhaps he had simply forgotten his own potential. All because of one quiet decision repeated every morning at 5 a.m. At first, nothing dramatic happened. That is the part most people never talk about. When people hear stories about transformation, they expect sudden success. They expect overnight miracles, instant wealth, or some life-changing opportunity appearing out of nowhere. But his life did not change that way. In fact, for a while, everything looked almost exactly the same from the outside. He still lived in the same small room. He still struggled financially. He still faced stress, uncertainty, and exhaustion. The world did not suddenly reward him just because he started waking up at 5 a.m. But something far more important was beginning to change quietly beneath the surface. Every morning, while the city still slept, he began building small habits. Tiny actions that seemed meaningless at first. After waking up, he drank water instead of immediately checking his phone. He stretched his body. He walked outside for fresh air. Sometimes he sat in silence for 10 minutes just thinking about his life honestly. Then he started reading. At first, it was only a few pages each morning. Books about discipline. Books about psychology. Books about successful people who had once struggled exactly like him. He realized something shocking. Many of the people he admired were not born extraordinary. They simply mastered ordinary habits better than everyone else. That realization changed the way he viewed success forever. For years, he believed successful people possessed something special that he lacked: intelligence, talent, luck, connections. But the more he learned, the more he understood that success often grows slowly through repeated actions nobody notices. Small disciplines repeated every day eventually become powerful. So he kept going. Some mornings were beautiful. The sunrise filled him with energy and hope. Other mornings were miserable. His eyes burned from exhaustion. His body begged for more sleep. Sometimes he questioned whether any of this even mattered. After all, his bank account was still empty. His problems were still real. Nobody congratulated him for waking up early. But he continued anyway. And slowly, the small habits began affecting every part of his life. Because he woke up earlier, he stopped sleeping so late at night. Because he slept earlier, his mind became clearer during the day. Because his mind became clearer, he made better decisions. He wasted less time online. He became more focused at work. He spoke more carefully. He reacted less emotionally. Even his posture changed. He walked differently. He carried himself differently. For the first time in years, he felt awake while living his own life. He also began exercising in the mornings. Nothing extreme. Just simple movement. Push-ups on the floor. Walking longer distances. Stretching his stiff body. But those small acts created momentum. The stronger his body became, the stronger his mind felt. And the stronger his mind became, the more discipline he developed. One habit started creating another. That is the hidden nature of transformation. Good habits rarely arrive alone. They begin connecting together quietly, like small chains pulling a person toward a different future. Weeks passed. Then months. People around him slowly began noticing something unusual. "You seem different lately," one coworker told him. "You look more focused," another person said. Even his face looked different. Less tired. Less defeated. But what nobody understood was this: the greatest change was invisible. The poor man who once hated mornings now protected them fiercely. Because those early hours had become sacred to him. They were no longer just about productivity. They became proof that he was capable of controlling himself. And self-control changes everything. For years, his emotions controlled his life. If he felt lazy, he avoided work. If he felt stressed, he escaped into distractions. If he felt hopeless, he gave up easily. But discipline taught him something powerful: feelings should not always be obeyed. Some mornings he still woke up unmotivated. Some mornings the bed still whispered comfort to him. But every time he got up anyway, he weakened the version of himself that wanted to remain weak. That is why discipline transforms people more deeply than motivation ever can. Motivation makes you start. Discipline makes you continue. And continuing is what changes destiny. One morning, while sitting with a notebook under the pale morning sky, he wrote something that would stay with him forever. "My life is changing because I am changing what I repeat every day." That sentence became a turning point in his mind. He finally understood that identity is not created through wishes. It is created through repetition. A lazy person becomes lazy by repeating lazy habits. A disciplined person becomes disciplined by repeating disciplined actions. Every day, people are teaching themselves who they are. And for the first time in his life, he began teaching himself strength instead of weakness. His financial situation also slowly improved. Not because money suddenly appeared, but because his thinking improved first. He started learning valuable skills during the early mornings instead of wasting hours online at night. He became more reliable at work. He managed his time better. Opportunities that once passed by unnoticed now became visible to him because his mind was finally awake enough to recognize them. But perhaps the most important transformation was this: he stopped feeling powerless. That feeling alone changed everything. Years earlier, he believed life happened to him. Now he understood that although he could not control every circumstance, he could control many daily choices. And daily choices eventually shape entire lives. The world still saw him as a poor man for a while longer. His clothes were still simple. His room was still small. His struggles had not completely disappeared. but internally, he was no longer the same person. Because every morning at 5 a.m., while most people slept, he was quietly rebuilding himself piece by piece. As his life slowly began to improve, he started noticing something strange about the people around him. Most of them wanted a better life. They talked constantly about success, money, happiness, and freedom. They complained about stress. They complained about being tired, stuck, and unmotivated. They dreamed about becoming healthier, richer, more disciplined, more confident. But when morning arrived, almost none of them were willing to change the habits destroying their future. That realization hit him deeply. He understood now that the biggest obstacle in most people's lives is not lack of intelligence, talent, or opportunity. It is comfort. Comfort is dangerous because it feels harmless. Sleeping 1 extra hour feels harmless. Watching videos late into the night feels harmless. Scrolling endlessly through social media feels harmless. But day after day, year after year, those small decisions slowly shape a person's entire destiny. Most people never notice it happening. They think their lives are controlled by giant moments while ignoring the quiet routines that secretly control everything. They wait for motivation, inspiration, or the perfect time to begin changing. But weeks become months. Months become years. And eventually, they wake up one day wondering where their life went. He saw this everywhere. Every night, millions of people stayed awake wasting hours on meaningless distractions, then woke up exhausted and confused about why they felt lost. They wanted success while feeding habits that created failure. They wanted confidence while constantly breaking promises to themselves. They wanted a different future while protecting the same destructive routines. And the painful truth is this: people do not become trapped all at once. They become trapped gradually. One lazy morning becomes a lazy week. A lazy week becomes a lazy year. And eventually, laziness no longer feels temporary, it becomes identity. That is why so many people fail to change their lives. Not because change is impossible, but because comfort slowly becomes addictive. The human mind naturally chooses what feels easy in the moment. Sleeping feels easier than waking early. Entertainment feels easier than self-improvement. Complaining feels easier than discipline. The brain constantly searches for immediate pleasure while ignoring long-term consequences. He understood this now because he had lived it himself. For years, he told himself lies that sounded reasonable. I'm too tired. I'll start next week. One more night won't matter. But those excuses were not protecting him. They were quietly destroying him. And perhaps the most dangerous part of excuses is that they feel true while your life is falling apart. Most people never realize how much power mornings have over the human mind. When a person wakes up late, rushed, distracted, and exhausted, the entire day becomes reactive. The mind immediately enters survival mode. Stress begins before peace ever has a chance to appear. The day controls the person instead of the person controlling the day. But waking up early changes the relationship between a person and time itself. At 5 a.m., he discovered something most people never experience anymore: silence. Real silence. No endless notifications. No chaos. No demands. Just space to think clearly. And clear thinking is rare in modern life. Most people live in constant mental noise. Their minds are overcrowded with entertainment, opinions, fear, comparison, and distraction. They are always consuming something but rarely listening to themselves. That is why many people no longer know what they truly want. They move through life automatically, reacting instead of consciously living. The poor man realized that his old life had been built almost entirely on unconscious habits. He slept late automatically. He wasted time automatically. He escaped discomfort automatically. And because his habits were unconscious, his future became unconscious too. But discipline forced awareness into his life. Every morning at 5 a.m. became a decision, a battle, a moment where he had to choose between comfort and growth. And over time, Those small decisions began strengthening his mind in ways he never expected. He noticed that disciplined people often share one important quality: they do difficult things before they feel ready. They do not wait for perfect emotions. They act despite resistance. Meanwhile, most people remain stuck because they obey every feeling immediately. If they feel tired, they quit. If they feel bored, they stop. If they feel uncomfortable, they escape. But growth has always required discomfort. A stronger body requires physical strain. A stronger mind requires mental struggle. A better future requires sacrifice in the present. There is no escaping this law of life. And yet modern society constantly sells the opposite message: easy pleasure, instant gratification, endless entertainment. People are taught to avoid discomfort at all costs, even though discomfort is often the doorway to transformation. He realized now why so many dreams die quietly. Not because people are incapable, but because they refuse to build routines powerful enough to support the life they desire. Everybody wants the results. Few people want the discipline. Everybody admires successful people. Few people admire repetition, sacrifice, and consistency, the invisible things that create success. The truth is, most lives are shaped during ordinary mornings nobody remembers. One person sleeps through opportunity again and again, telling themselves they will change someday. Another person wakes early, studies quietly, exercises quietly, improves quietly, and slowly builds a future nobody can see yet. At first, the difference between them looks small. But after years, the gap becomes enormous. One life drifts. The other is built intentionally. That is why the poor man stopped seeing mornings as ordinary. Every sunrise became symbolic to him. Another chance to choose discipline over excuses. Another chance to defeat the weaker version of himself. Another chance to build a future instead of merely hoping for one. And he realized something powerful. People often think they are missing opportunity, when in reality, they are missing structure. Without structure, time disappears. Without discipline, potential disappears. Without awareness, years disappear. He thought back to the person he used to be, waking late, feeling tired before the day even began, wasting hours without purpose, secretly hating himself for not changing. And he understood now that his greatest enemy had never been poverty. It had been unconscious living. Because when a person loses control of their habits, they slowly lose control of their future. And the frightening part is that it happens quietly, one morning at a time. Years later, people would look at his life and assume the transformation happened because he woke up at 5 a.m. But they misunderstood the real secret. The secret was never the hour itself. There is nothing magical about 5 a.m. The clock alone cannot change a human life. A person can wake up early and still remain lost, distracted, and undisciplined. The true power was never hidden inside the time. It was hidden inside what the habit represented. Because every morning he woke up before sunrise, he was teaching himself something far more important than productivity. He was teaching himself self-mastery. For most of his life, he had been controlled by impulses, controlled by comfort, controlled by laziness, distraction, fear, and emotional weakness. He thought poverty was only financial, but eventually he realized there are people with money who are mentally poor, spiritually weak, and emotionally lost. And there are also people with very little who possess discipline, clarity, and inner strength. The early mornings gave him that strength. At 5 a.m., nobody was forcing him to wake up. Nobody was watching him. Nobody would punish him if he stayed in bed. Which meant every morning became an act of personal responsibility. A silent decision to rise anyway. A silent declaration that he would no longer surrender his future to weakness. That is why the habit changed his life so deeply. Because real transformation begins the moment a person stops negotiating with the habits destroying them. Over time, he no longer feared difficult things the way he once did. Waking up early trained his mind to face resistance instead of escaping it. And that lesson slowly spread into every area of his life. He became more courageous in conversations, more focused in work, more patient during hardship, more disciplined with money, more intentional with time. The weak version of himself did not disappear overnight. Some mornings still felt difficult even years later. Some days exhaustion returned. Some nights temptation whispered to him again. But now he understood something powerful. Discipline is not about becoming perfect. It is about refusing to quit on yourself repeatedly. That understanding changed the way he viewed success forever. When people saw his improved life later, the better income, the healthier body, the calmer mind, the growing confidence, they often asked him the same question. What changed you? And he would smile quietly because the answer sounded too simple for most people to believe. He changed his mornings. But deeper than that, he changed his relationship with himself. For years, he had betrayed himself daily through broken promises and wasted time. Every time he said he would improve tomorrow and failed to act, his self-respect weakened a little more. But every time he woke at 5 a.m. despite resistance, he rebuilt trust within himself. And self-trust is one of the most powerful forces a human being can possess. Because once a person truly believes they can rely on themselves, everything changes. He no longer needed constant motivation from the outside world. He no longer waited for perfect conditions. He no longer blamed life for every difficulty. He realized that while pain is unavoidable, unnecessary suffering often grows from unconscious habits repeated for years. One morning, standing beneath the pale orange light of sunrise, he suddenly remembered the hopeless man he used to be. The man lying awake at night feeling like life had already passed him by. The man drowning in excuses, distraction, and self-pity. And for a moment, he felt emotional realizing how close he had come to wasting his entire existence. Not because he lacked intelligence. Not because he lacked opportunity. But because he lacked discipline. That realization haunted him deeply. He understood now that many people never become who they could have been, not because greatness was impossible for them, but because they never learned to control themselves consistently. They wait for giant opportunities while ignoring the small daily decisions shaping their identity. They dream about changing their future while repeating the same habits every morning. But life rarely changes dramatically in one moment. It changes quietly. One habit at a time. One decision at a time. One morning at a time. The poor man eventually improved his financial situation. He built stability. He earned respect. His life became more peaceful. But strangely, the greatest reward was not money at all. It was freedom from the version of himself that once felt powerless. He had discovered something that many people spend their entire lives searching for. The ability to direct his own mind instead of being controlled by it. And that is the real secret of 5 a.m. Not waking early for the sake of waking early. Not chasing productivity trends. Not trying to imitate successful people. But learning how to conquer the weakest parts of yourself while the rest of the world sleeps. Because every sunrise asks a silent question. Will you continue living unconsciously? Or will you finally take responsibility for the direction of your life? Every morning is a crossroads most people never notice. One path leads toward comfort, excuses, distraction, and regret. The other leads toward discipline, awareness, growth, and self-respect. And although the difference between those paths seems small in the beginning, over years they lead to completely different lives. That is why mornings matter so much. Because the way you begin your day slowly becomes the way you begin your life. So tomorrow morning, before the noise of the world reaches you, before the notifications appear, before responsibilities and distractions pull your attention away, sit quietly for a moment and ask yourself one honest question. Who could I become if I truly changed my habits? Not next year. Not someday. Starting tomorrow morning. Because sometimes, one quiet decision at 5 a.m. is enough to begin an entirely new life.